August 21st, 2024. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. We have 6 cases on the agenda and 6 members present for a quorum. The first case on the agenda is RPC 35005-034 at 1401 South Joy Street. Justin Price is here on behalf of the owner. Mr. Price, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
All right. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Justin Price. The subject property for this appeal is 1401 Joyce on Pentagon Row. This is a 15-story high-rise apartment with 326 units. And I'll start off just with the gross potential rent here. And if you follow me, our income analysis is on page 5, but I'll start my presentation on page 4. For our analysis, we have used the 3-year average to illustrate a stabilized performance of the property. And over those 3 years, the average gross potential income was $9,617,000. We have used the actual parking income of $338,000. And also, we have included other income of $458,000. For vacancy and expense rate, we have used the Arlington County guidelines of 6% for the interest rate. For the vacancy rate, and then an expense rate of $9,448 per unit, or a total of $3,080,000. The county is only using an expense rate of $7,812. But please note that the calendar year 2023 expenses were higher at $12,359 per unit. So we believe that, once again, to be uniform, and it's appropriate to use the Arlington County guidelines of $9,448, even though the actual expenses were much higher. Finally, we believe a cap rate adjustment is warranted for this property. We have seen across the board in several neighboring jurisdictions that they have slightly increased their cap rates, and we also have provided cap rate data to suggest that with the market of interest rates increasing, and also the need for a higher return for many investors who purchase these commercial properties, that a higher cap rate is deemed necessary. So throughout my analysis on page 5, I have not only showed other jurisdictions that have increased their cap rates from year over year, but also a fourth quarter 2023 RARC apartments in the Virginia area that also suggests that a cap rate increase is warranted. So in our analysis, we did increase that cap rate to 5.79%. And that gets us our total value of $115,880,000. But we also ran the model on the county's cap rate of 5.39%, and we still come out at a lower value of $124,480,000. So as I mentioned before, just looking at the 3-year average of the performance of the property, and also using county guidelines, we believe that a adjustment for the assessment is warranted.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So this is a high-rise apartment built in 2003, 326 residential units located within walking distance to the fashion center at Pentagon and the metro station. The units feature stainless steel appliances and granite countertops. The common areas on the ground floor and the top floor have been updated. The issue brought up by the appellants are the OPEX and the cap rate. And the issues we would like to point out to the board are that the 2022 and 2023 OPEX reported by the appellants included capital expenses, replacement costs, and other unit renovations, as well as casualty loss. The operating expenses were, we believe they were overstated for both of these years. The potential rent and NOI experienced at the property for the past 2 years have been increasing. However, in their projections, column G, the appellants are applying over 5% decrease to the potential rent. And also, despite the fact that the vacancy and collections reported in the past 4 years were below our stabilized vacancy rate. So for the 2022 I&E in our C1 column, we reconstructed and we excluded 1.768 million for common areas, 196,000 for capital costs, and 154,000 for casualty loss. These are rounded numbers I'm providing. For the 2023 I&E in our column E1, we had also reconstructed and we excluded 160,000 for capital costs, 364,000 for project replacements, and over 500,000 for the miscellaneous common area, and also $323,000 for unit renovations. Since the property's rent increased by 4.8% in 2023 and by almost 7% in year 2022, we projected a modest 2.04 increase in our column F. We applied 6% stabilized vacancy, again, while the property reported only 3.31%. And this is why our projected EGI, as the board can see, our projected EGI is below the EGI reported by the appellants in 2023. We increased our OPEX ratio from 25% to 26.25%, and yet still our projected NOI was below the reconstructed 2023 NOI. Now, I do need to bring to the board's attention that last night I realized that I made a minor mistake, and I still stand by the test column F, and I do believe that no revision should be made to the income, vacancies, and concessions, effective gross income, OPEX, and NOI. I overlooked the fact that the cap rate used in the 2024 analysis, which was 5.39%, that needs to be manually overwritten due to our RIA surrounding limitations. So if we include the national lending bid rate of 0.043%, the cap rate should be 5.393%, not 5.39%. And with that being said, the assessment will go down by $78,900. So again, using our original NOI of $7,640,156, as shown in column D, and by application of revised cap rate, our assessment should actually decrease by this nominal amount, and it should be $141,668,000. And in respect to the cap rates, this is, again, a property with effective age of 2003, located close to the metro, close to the major shopping and commuting centers. Our cap rates are expressed in ranges, and they do vary depending on the location and proximity to the metro, the effective age, and the type of the property. We relied upon third quarter commercial real estate publications, and information published after January 1, 2024 was not considered in our analysis. However, it will be considered during 2025 analysis. Thank you. I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metz.
I'm not sure who this goes to. I'll start with the department because you did the write-up. And on page 2 of 183 for 2022 and 2023, you suggest that some operating expenses associated with common area, and for 2023, miscellaneous common area.
Yeah, so there was a permit for, so I reached out to the agent and they provided the breakdown, but they did, and I included the email communication in the packet, and they did not provide any further details in respect to that over $500,000 expense for miscellaneous common area. But we did see the permit. There was a permit pulled for renovation of common areas. These were common elements located on the ground floor and on the top floor. And also I did conduct the inspection this June, And the property manager did confirm that there were renovations done to the common areas. So based on that information, we excluded that $500,000.
Did you consider it in both 2022 and 23 that they're capital expenses and not standard maintenance? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Mhm.
Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, so this is a well-established property showing increasing potential rents with excellent location, walking distance to major shopping and commuting centers. I'm not sure why the appellants project declining rents based on what they were reporting for the past 2 years. The vacancy is low, and I do believe that our numbers used in analysis were fair and appropriate. I asked the board to consider our original NOI used in our 2024 analysis, which is $7,640,156, and apply the revised correct cap rate of 5.393%. And that will bring us to the revised 2024 assessment of $141,668,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Price, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So a few things, speaking of the expenses, all expenses that have been raised in question by the county have been answered fully and as transparent as possible. We replied to any requests for further details, and even in our emails, we always put, if there's anything else we can accommodate or supply, we will. After that email that we sent of all the detail, there was no further questions. So there was no, on our end, there's nothing else for us to explain besides what we have provided. My last point is the county is, in their initial analysis, is using an NOI of $7.6 million. The property has never operated at that capacity ever since 2020. Every single year for the past 3 to 4 years, it has been around 7 million, 5 million, and 6.5 million. So we believe that using the stabilized 3-year performance and also using the county guidelines is an appropriate way to evaluate this property. So we believe that we have provided a case that warrants an adjustment for the assessment. And
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Your time has expired. Okay, it's just among the board. I'll just say, I thought that the county, said that there was a mistake and went to fix it, but I think it's like picking from one and not the other. I mean, when you appeal, it opens up the whole thing. They got the information, they did the test, they've got a different NOI. If you apply the proper cap rate, it's higher. So I'm fine with the original assessment. I don't see why we go lower. And it's kind of like saying,
Wouldn't the answer be that they applied the wrong, they're keeping all their numbers in the original, and that they applied the wrong, albeit minimal, cap rate? I mean, they're just.
saying that, but when you
that'd be
appeal,
something.
you open it up to all the numbers, and now they have the numbers, and the NOI is actually higher based on having the numbers. And with the
Right.
correction, it ends up being higher than the original, so I don't see where we go back to the original and then make it even lower.
Well, I think if she had, if this were 3 weeks ago and the assessor found the mistake that she found last night,
When we all get a vote.
it would have been that 100,000 less, whatever. I don't agree with that.
Where's everybody else?
I thought the expenses were maybe a bit low compared to even deducting the capital improvements that we, I guess, overstated. The reconstructed property in Q1, this is almost 3.7. So I thought maybe adjusting the expenses to the original assessment instead of 25, I used 26%. Comes up with expense of 2,648, slightly higher. That would bring the value down to 139,779. Not much, but I think it's
And that's using the correct cap rate.
with using the correct cover.
Is that column D?
Column D, using the expenses to 26
Mhm.
and using the correct cap rate.
The reason I didn't do what you just did is it looked to me like the apartment income was too low. So I did it
In which column?
in D.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's too low, yeah. Why are we using the test with the?
I didn't really look at the test as far as the income because I think, what this original assessment used, and looking at the operating year, I think, yeah, I think it was.
You were looking at the operating year.
The
I missed
their reported income
23.
and what the assessor used, they're almost.
Yeah. That's why I was asking why.
I did look at the reconstructed. Much higher.
I was fine the original set of numbers. I mean, I'm looking at the gross potential income of the actual reconstructed. It's, and the county was good for them. They also gave them the 6% vacancy. I mean, yeah, I mean,
That's
where I balance that back out at the bottom. I didn't see increasing expenses. I looked at that, but I think the county is generous a little bit. And this
Is it
is
in the
6%
test
on
column?
top of it,
Is it test column?
on the D.
Yeah, initially I thought it was appropriate to use the corrected cap rate, but you brought up a good point. So as far as GPI, the county used a lower GPI than what was reported. They also used that 6%, like you talked about, which was higher than the actual vacancy. The operating expenses for the last 3 years averaged about 25% or so, so I thought that was fine. So I would be inclined to vote to go to the original assessment. 141, 746.9.
you mean with the 200 less?
With the correct cap rate.
You mean that?
I
That's her change based on.
will, because
Correct.
of Mary's point to the test column, I think I would just stick with the original 2024 assessment.
Right, where are you?
I do the original.
Well, I think I'm good with the original, but I think we ought to make that slight adjustment.
Me too. I mean, that's not an opinion, or a judgment, that's a fact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the county approved, favor of doing that also. So.
All right.
All right,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Either one is.
Do it. I'm not gonna make the motion to do it, but go ahead and do it.
I move that we lower the assessment to $141,668,000. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, so that is a motion and second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right, so it is reduced to these recommended number of 141,668 based on the original assessment capped at the new cap rate of, or the adjusted cap rate of 5.393. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, do we have Mr. Harmon and Mr. Peralta, please?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, there we go. All right, second case on the agenda is RPC 24004015 at 2100 Washington Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes. Talk about this property.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. Rob, good morning. 2100 Washington Boulevard. This is part of Sequoia Plaza. It's located at Washington Boulevard and Highway 50, right in that corner, right at that intersection. This building is currently fully leased by Arlington County. Now, in September of last year, so September of 2023, the lease adjusted to a lower rental rate. It also reset the pass-through income base year, and this is all based on something that was negotiated in 2016. In March of 2016, the first amendment to the lease was signed, and as part of that lease, rental rates decreased in September of 2023, and that pass-through income base year reset in September of 2023. So knowing that, we know that going forward, future rental income and pass-through income will be lower than past income. The result in this change is a rental rate of $38.11 per square foot. The county does not contest that value. The result is also reduced pass-through income going forward. Now, as you can see on the county's test page on page 3 of the appeal, the assessment in column D does not impute this $38.11 rental rate that was in place according to the lease in place as of the date of value. Rather, the assessment imputes rent at $40 per square foot. Now you can see on note 1 that the county does acknowledge the actual rental rate is $38.11 before any concessions, but still that $40 per square foot rate is imputed on the assessment. Now, by using a rental rate that is greater than the actual lease in place at the property, the assessment values this property differently than other offices in the county, which of course results in an assessment that is not equalized. As we're all aware, the Constitution of Virginia requires uniformity and equalization. The 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution also requires equal treatment under the law. In this case, by not considering the actual rent in place, which is not contested, the assessment is not uniform or equalized with similar properties. The county states in their review of the assessment that the higher than actual rental rate is supported because of prior year's income at the property. But again, as I mentioned, the rental rate was reduced in September of 2023. So relying on the higher income in 2023 to justify the higher rental income in 2024, that 2023 income is not going to be repeated going forward. That 2023 rental rate doesn't come back until I believe 2029 as a result of this first amendment to the lease that was signed in 2016. So 2023 is not a great year to compare to because we know income will be lower because of this amendment that kicked in lower rents in September of last year. The owner's 2024 operating budget shows rental income of about $5.7 million, which is what we've close to what we've imputed in column G. We imputed our value based on that rental rate and based on the updated pass-through income. So we know income is going to be lower than it was last year because the rental rate was lowered and the base year was reset. Because of this, again, it's not appropriate to rely on prior year's income to justify the assessment. The downward trend in income is evident as well from 2022 to 2023. It's going to still continue down in 2024. Now, the county makes this same error on column F, where they cobble together data points from various sources to come up with what they call a reconstructed column. You can see the county's reconstructed column uses prior year's income that we know will not be repeated going forward due to the lower rental rates going forward. We request the assessment be adjusted to reflect the actual rental rate of $38.11 per square foot and the new base year pass-through income. Next, for the cap rate, in addition to the analysis we've previously discussed with the Corpax report, market surveys, we can also look to a good sale in the county that occurred in February. 1201 Wilson sold for a cap rate of over 8.6%. 1201 Wilson is a much newer building than the subject. It's a 2017 build versus the subject, which was built in 1987. 1201 Wilson is also near a metro in Roslyn, whereas the subject is not does not have metro access. Making these adjustments to the cap rate, the county's cap rate change from a 1987 build to a 2017 build is 100 basis points, and the county's cap rate adjustment for metro properties is 25 basis points. We see that if we build up that sale cap rate for 1201 for those adjustments, the comparable cap rate would be 9.87%. We've provided analysis of 1201 Wilson, that sale, on pages 22 through 25 of the Wilkes Artist Board Book that was provided to the board as well as the Department of Real Estate Assessments. Now, 9.87%, this is also supported by the sale of 4601 Fairfax in August of 2023. That property sold for a cap rate of just under 20%. So that property was 60% leased. This one, of course, is closer to fully leased. So an adjustment down to about half of that sale cap rate is appropriate to 9.87. Now, anticipating the county's responses based on prior hearings, I anticipate they'll state the assessment imputes 8% vacancy and collection loss, while the property is actually just 1.2% vacant. This vacancy and collection loss is required by law, so it's not a gift from the county. This is how appraisal practice states the income approach to value should be constructed. Any potential purchaser in the county, when looking at this property, would impute vacancy and collection loss at the market rate, which the county tells us is 8%. Now, compare this also to the county's vacancy and collection loss on properties that are greater than 28% vacant. The county has many, many properties in the county with greater than 28% vacancy, and millions of dollars of income that don't exist have been added to their assessments. So over the course of the assessments, the county does benefit more from the vacancy and collection deductions than the owners do. Now, to summarize, this property is leased to Arlington County for $38.11 per square foot. This is not disputed by the county, yet the assessment imputes rent at $40 per square foot, which results in unequal treatment for this property. The county relies on prior year's income to support the assessment. We know that prior year's income will not be reported because repeated, because the rental rate decreased and the pass-through income decreased. Now, alternatively, if this is the measuring stick we want to look at assessments with, is the prior year income, please, let's stick to it with properties that are not at 98% occupancy. When the assessments impute NOI that is well above the actual, we need to go down to those actuals. Now, the county was provided the details of the new lease and the new base year, yet has still used the old rates. Finally, the cap rate not supported by market data results in an assessment of $400 per square foot, which is not in line with market sales. It's also not in line with the sister building at 2110 Washington Boulevard, which has the exact same tenant and occupancy and is assessed at only $343 per square foot. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, good morning. For this case, as Mr. Harmon pointed out, Arlington County is the main tenant. It's a long-term tenant. I believe the lease or the old lease or the new lease, I can't really tell what's included in the 2023 rent roll because it states that the original lease date was, I believe, 2019. When looking at that, the lease term ends in 2032, I believe. Similar to the sister building next door that we'll hear after this case. With respect to the rent, again, we follow the rent as reported in the INE. For the 2024 assessment, the county underprojected the rent compared to what was reported in the 2023 INE by $348,600. And that's using that $40 square foot rate that we originally used in 2024. Now, looking at, ultimately how the NOI projects in our original assessment because of our guidelines and comparing that to what was originally reported in the 2023 INE, we're almost about $1 million under what was reported in 2023. And then when you reconstruct, we actually lower that even more because of the guidelines using the 8% guidelines and vacancy. Now, to speak to the change in pass-throughs that Mr. Harmon has pointed out, again, as I mentioned earlier last week, we follow what the pass-throughs have been reported. We, as a department, took that argument off the table and we just used the actual that was reported. So if you're going to use equity to compare this property with other office buildings in the county, We do exactly that. We use exactly what was reported in 2023. You'll see that we did estimate a little higher in our original assessment based on 2022 because we felt that the projection would have been higher and is more of a melding of the previous years. If you compare 2020 to 2023, pass-throughs have been up and down, but for the most part, this property is well stabilized. The dip I would point to from 22 to 2023 was mainly due in part, I believe, to the vacant square footage. So there's about 1,741 square feet that became vacant from 2022 to 2023. And I believe that's the main difference there, why there's a change in income projected or reported from 2022 to 2023. I would like to mention that although this property is well stabilized, the county did reduce this property by 16%. That's over $11 million from last year to this year. And I think that's a profound, it gives you a better understanding of what our guidelines did to this property, which is fully stabilized, and, you know, our change in cap rates and our adjustment to vacancy and how that affects the income of the property and the overall value. So with that, we do ask that you confirm this case at 59,464,300, and we're open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, this is for the owner. The lease was amended in September of 23. When did the lesser payments take effect? When did that begin?
So the lease was amended in March of 2016, and then September of 2023 was when the lower rental rate kicked in.
Oh,
So
okay.
that was in effect as of end of third quarter last year.
Okay.
Mr. Metzger?
For the appellant, that 2016 amendment where it went down in 8 years, September 2023, did it include annual escalation such that in September 2024 would go up some certain percentage?
So it does go back to annual escalations, but it does not go back to the 2023 rate until 2029 is the next time it gets back up to the 2023 rate. So it took a significant drop, and the escalations are very slight. It's going to take about 6 years to get back up to that prior level.
So it's maybe 1% annual escalation kind of thing?
Yeah, July of 29 is the next time it gets back up to the 2023 rate. So
No, 2023 rate meaning the $40 or the lower, which
I'm sorry, yes, the
There's two
prior
rates.
rental rate, the early 2023 rate.
I'm trying to get at is in your column G, you have $5.6 million plus at $38.11. You're projecting it for 2024, but is it really a little more than that because the last quarter of 2024 is a little higher than the first 3 quarters in terms of dollars per square foot? The 38.11.
It does escalate within 2024, but that's the same as any lease.
And you know that. I just want to know your hard numbers.
Yes,
So I have
yes.
to
So
redo the number. You include that minor escalation in the last
no,
quarter.
we use the rent in place as of January 1, the same as the county does when they review leases, and the same as
Great. Okay. Now my question for the department is, did you have what Mr. Harmon just described, that there was a built-in amendment every 8 years or so, or 5 years? Did you have access to all of that, or was that in the original 2016 lease or somewhere else? In other words, that the rent goes down and the pass-through is reset for 2024?
I don't recall ever receiving that information.
So it is a lease with Arlington County. So Arlington County does have the lease, and no request was made for it either.
So the department, since you didn't have any updated paperwork whatsoever, that's why you maintain the $40 and the pass-through rates.
They do
This is
have
for
the rent
for
roll.
The department, Mr. Harmon, thanks. You
If I could
got
address
no,
that, Mr. Matzkin, this lease has
Sorry.
been provided previously.
no, I'm asking the department.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Oh,
Ms.
I'm
Moore,
sorry. Forgive me.
mute her.
Yeah, you got no paperwork, you didn't make any changes from 23 to 24 because there was nothing in front of you that said there should be any changes. Is that
Correct.
correct? It's a question,
Correct.
not a statement.
Correct.
Okay,
So, Mr. Matzkin, the rent roll was provided with the INE. The county
Yeah.
does have this. It's in the appeal packet.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
good. That's a good answer.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Peralta, take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. The rent roll was provided and the actual per square foot rate is actually $38.50. Again, the gross potential rent in the original assessment was projected 4% less than what was reported, $261,976. The expense rate was $1.16 more than what was reported. And to Mr. To the point about rent escalation, this property is going to increase at 3% fixed for every year going forward. So, this property again has a qualified tenant, and it's been stabilized, and we dropped it 11 million from last year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So page 33 of the county submission to the board today has that $38.11 rental rate on it. This was submitted 2 different times to the county. They have the $38.11 rental rate. They chose to ignore it. We assess based on the principle of anticipation. Why would anybody anticipate $40 per square foot rent when the lease with Arlington County says it's $38.11? The county has this information in 3 different sources, yet chose to ignore it. That 3% escalation, that's what's on the rent roll. That's not what's in the amendment that the county has. We ask that the county use the county's lease to be uniform with other similarly situated properties in the county. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this if you're going to own an office building. And we've been hearing all year about risk. And, if you have short-term leases and they're going to expire and the tenant's going to leave and everything. And so the cap rate adjusts due to risk. And I mean, here if you pay the 60 million for an income of 5 million, you're over 8% return on your investment. And the leases go till 2032. Rob has given them a drop of 11 million. I mean, I just don't see any reason to change it.
Mr. Yates.
The 3811, you think that's a valid number? I mean, the county, I believe it was presented. They did not use it. I ran a couple different scenarios, and the final one I ran was the appellant's numbers that are pretty close to what they were, doing with it. And I just applied the county's cap rate. That came in lower at 52,660,500.
My only concern with that is if you look at the original assessment, just look at the NOI. I mean, regardless of how you got there, it's less than what was reported.
Yeah, that's where I had my rub. That's why I ran it off of things on the, and did the same calculation, 3811 on the column D. That is column D. Yeah,
Right, and even the adjustment, the reconstructed.
that came down 400,000 on column D. If I did change the route.
Right.
I think the reason for that, Mary, is that 3/4 of the year in 2023, it was at the higher rental rate and pass-throughs. In 2024, there's lower rental rate and no pass-throughs. Now, why the appellant's pro forma, column G, has pass-throughs in it is a mystery to me. I was going to ask the question, I decided it just wasn't going to.
They're greatly
They
reduced.
insist
There's still some.
Many times we see, somebody's lease is gonna expire or something like that, and we say, well, that'll be captured in.
Sure.
2024.
Sure.
Yeah. So to me, at the, December 31st, January 1st, this is what the building performed at, and to be equalized, that's how we assess every other property. We don't go and look and say,
No, but this isn't prospective. This is as of September 2023, meaning 1/1/24. It's a lower rental rate and no pass-throughs, period.
The rate
That's-
was lower.
And that's again reflected in the counties, the rent rolls the counties receive from the appellant. It's not that,
and they're using something less than what they received.
who's they, where?
The county.
The county.
I mean, if you.
In column
the
F?
Original assessment. I mean, the NOI, they're using 4.9.
Yeah, which is, I don't understand how that happened.
Where, I'm sorry, where are you? What column?
NOI, column D,
D,
4.9.
okay?
They reported 5.8. The county adjusted and reconstructed 5.3. So they're already lower than what they reported with only having, part of the year having had it already decreased.
But, the columns D that we see are just kind of best estimates based on year and a half old data.
Right.
So we have better
And the
data.
whole idea behind appealing is then you give the 2023 information, and they were higher than what the county was using.
But again, in part because they were counting pass-throughs in 2023 actuals and a $40 rent actuals for 3/4 of the year in 2023, column E.
Mhm.
But now it goes down, and it's not conjectural. I think everybody would agree it reset
I think,
as of 1/1/24.
yeah, and December 31st, 2024, I'd agree with you. Because that'll be income for this year.
No,
The January 1 date is, the rental rate is 38.11.
3811 and no pass-throughs.
It doesn't matter
It's
what,
not prospective. It was already in place.
the fact their actuals were higher, we know on that date, it's gonna be lower.
And
The problem I have is, when they appeal these cases, a lot of times we see copies of the lease. I don't see anything that shows us what the terms of the amended lease is. I would have liked to see a listing of what the terms are. They're stating here, and all of a sudden, they're saying that the county is supposed to provide that, but no, it's the appellant.
no, absolutely.
And
No, yes.
the thing is that, looking at the rent rolls that they provided, and those are numbers that they provided, it's 38.50, like Mr. Peralta said. And the numbers are just increasing. The rentals, the rent is not going to be going down based on current rent roll. So, I'm okay with the current.
Well, I don't agree
All
with
the
that.
numbers are just showing much less than.
What about the three places he said it was in?
GPI, EGI, NOIs, the expenses are much higher. So I can't really see where to make a change.
Mary, on your argument, or you really, what you're saying too, using the new rental rate, theoretically, their income should drop, their value should drop to 52 million next year. Not this year based on, because they haven't provided us that new rental rate in the form of a lease.
Based on the current rent roll, the numbers are not going to go down. There's an increase, like you indicate, there's always an increase.
Yeah, I heard 1%, I heard 3%. I mean, maybe it's a little higher, but and you're right, in column G, but I mean, we can reconstruct it all I heard 38.50, 38.11 several times, only 38.51. So it's just what Mark said. And it should be bumped up again for the last quarter of this coming year. But again, this was in place. This lower rent is not $40. It was in place at 1/1/24. And no,
Despite what they
pass-throughs
say,
1/1/24.
the rental rate was lower.
And I don't care that the wild but educated guess in column D brought the valuation down 11 million. All it is an estimated out-of-date estimate. Estimated estimate. But we have to go with the real numbers and
Right, well, and then
it's
again,
not prospective.
There's a test in there.
But the test keeps it at the 1/1/23 rate of $40.
Well, there's not a test, actually.
There's not.
No, I mean, the test based
Just to
on what was
reconstruct.
provided.
What I
Go
did,
ahead,
Ken,
hold on one second. Mr.
Yeah,
Cortez.
yeah, I'm trying to test, just to kind of split the two, I tried $39 a square foot. Because of course, it was only at the end of the year, so what they actually achieved was, it's gonna be more than that $38.11. So even with that, and I used the appellant's expenses at $550 instead of $650, it came up higher, so I would just stick with the original assessment personally. They're getting lower expenses than the column, or than the appellant is reporting in column G. They're also getting that 8% vacancy. And it's a very stable building. It's going down 16% almost this year, so support the original $59 million.
All right, so Barnes, you're still on the original?
yeah, what I looked at was the loss of income due to the amendment, and that's about 800,000. And the NOI went down about, what, 900,000, it looks like. So I saw it, I think the lower, I don't think Rob meant to, but he did take into account the lesser income. That's the way I looked at it.
He took into account the lesser income now by doing.
He
what?
didn't, but it ended up as if he had.
I believe we're splitting hairs here because. Would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll move that we confirm the county's original assessment at $59,464,300.
I'll second that.
We get a motion and a second by Mr. Rhonda. All in favor? I opposed. Two, the ones without. And Mark. The county is confirmed at $59,464,300. Moving on to the sister building, RPC 240040116 at 2110 Washington Boulevard. Mr. Harley, you can start with readings on this property.
Yes, thank you. So 2110 Washington Boulevard, this is adjacent to the property we just discussed. It was built in 1991 and is also occupied by Arlington County. Now, the issues on appeal are straightforward. The assessment imputes a non-uniform vacancy rate of 5% for vacancy and collection loss instead of the DREA guideline rate of 8%. And the cap rate imputed by the assessment is not reflective of the market as of January 1st, 2024. So page 21 of the DREA 2024 guidebook lists the vacancy and collection loss rates the county is supposed to use. The minimum deduction for vacancy and collection loss is 8% according to the DREA 2024 guidebook. For this property, the assessment imputes only 5% vacancy and collection loss. By not using 8% for vacancy and collection loss, the assessment treats this property differently than similar office properties in the county, which results in unequal, non-uniform, non-equalized treatment. This, of course, is prohibited by both the Virginia and the U.S. Constitution. Now, under Virginia law, the taxpayer is entitled to the lesser of either fair market value or a uniform assessment. Next, the cap rate for this property. This is below even one of the best properties in the county sold for. 1201 Wilson sold for 55 basis points higher than this property. 1201 Wilson is, of course, a much newer building. It was built in 2017. It was 98% occupied. It's located in the heart of Roslyn with access to the metro. Yet it's still sold at over an 8.6% cap rate. Compared to this property, a 1991 build with no metro access is assessed at just over 8% as a cap rate. Now, when we're looking at the length of lease, the county doesn't consider leases expiring. Length of lease does not factor into the county's appraisal assessment guidelines. So, if we are going to say this property has leases that go for a few years, therefore the cap rate should be lower, we only ask for consistency in the application of that logic, that when leases are set to expire in the coming year, 2024, 2025, that a cap rate adjustment upwards be made so that the assessments are uniform. Now, here again, the county relies on actual NOI at the property to support the assessed value. However, we know this is not how the county views properties that report NOI that is below the assessed value. This is unequal treatment and as such should be given no weight. The assessment, it's important to note, also increased from 2022 to 2023 when the office market was in clear decline. So the 2023 assessment is already a high level that is not supported by the market. So I anticipate the county may say we came down from 2023. Well, 2023 should have never been that high. 2023 increased when the market was declining. So 2023 assessment missed it. The 2024 assessment came back down to a similar level to the 2022 assessment. But of course, we know what happened beginning mid-2022. As soon as the Fed began raising interest rates aggressively, the office market deteriorated very quickly. So the 2024 value is similar to the 2022 value. The office market is not similar to the 2022 market. This property, in addition to the 2022 assessment, it has 2 years less of term. So if we are going to consider term, we need to look at it through that lens as well. Simply put, the current assessment is about the 2022 assessment. The office market has decreased from 2022. You can see this in assessment to sale ratios as well. The county has not accurately assessed a single office sale since mid-2022 to today. Every office sale for over 2 years has been below the assessment, oftentimes well below the assessment, as we'll see in the next case. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. This building, similar to the last building, is fully occupied. It's been quite stabilized since, I believe, 2019. From 2022 to 2023, the vacancy went from 4,881 square feet to 100% occupied in 2023. That would speak to kind of the increase in 2023. From 2023 to 2024, there was a decrease of about 5%, about 5%. Speaking about this property in general, we know that the rent roll suggested that the average rents in place are $39.68. County, in its original assessment, is using $35 a square foot. In the test, we bumped that up to $36 a square feet in lieu of what we found in the rent roll. And when you look at the overall NOI of this property compared to what was being reported, we're about 500,000 less than what was reported in the original assessment, and similarly in the retest when adjusting for the vacancy from 5% to 8%. We're actually high in expenses. You'll see that in the prior history of this property, it was quite stabilized. 2021 was a partial year. So really it's around like 7.25, 7.5 at best on average over the past 4 years. The county is using $8 in the original assessment. In lieu of the 2023 most recent projected expenses, we did keep that $8 in our test, and we're still actually capping out higher in value compared to what the original assessment was, given that we did see an increase in the per square foot rent average for this property. So with that, we do ask that the board confirm this case at $55,273,600. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Penrod.
Yeah, this is for Mr. Peralta. I mean, considering that this one and the building that we just saw before this one, they are pretty much alike in the same location, same effective age. Why is the vacancy different and also the cap rate?
The vacancy originally was incorrect, and we're using 8% in the retest.
Oh.
And then this building is 1990. Let me just see what the prior building was.
Yeah, well, 1990 effective year. Yeah, your question is exactly right.
1990 as well. So this is, last case was 8.3, and this case is 8.5.
05.
Okay.
Oh, fine.
05, sorry. 1990. Give me 1 second to refer to our guidelines.
Good.
Oh,
8.05. 8.05. This is the correct cap rate for this property. I'll have to check into the last case, but I believe there might be a year difference in when that was complete versus this year. I mean, versus this property, but
Okay. Well, thank you.
But we're not going to revisit the last case. I
both of them built in 87.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and yeah, according to this.
Okay. Mr. Mask.
I have some questions for the appellant. First one is, in column E, miscellaneous expenses are, it's not a big number, but relative to prior years and the current year projection, it's a big number. Something specific happened in 2023 that isn't projected to happen again and hasn't?
Okay, Mr.
Miscellaneous. Row 8.
Row 8, okay, miscellaneous income, okay.
Yep.
So that is I believe that's an antenna lease, the 136.
But you don't think that's going to happen in 2024? It was just a one-year lease question?
No, we included that, so I'm sorry, so we have the 130,775 in row 5. We put that in on our appeal. It's listed on our appeal as antenna income. It got copied over to the county's test page as other income. But the let me see, the open year 2023 136 miscellaneous, I believe let me go to the I&E. So the county puts these test pages together.
Okay,
I've got to
great.
see why they.
That's fine. Second question, is this like the last case, 100% Arlington County occupied?
It is, yeah, Arlington County.
And then last question, is the lease rates and other financial terms get reset like the building next door or not?
This one did not. No, the rental rate did not decrease. And I did just confirm that 130,000 of that is antenna income as shown on the I&E. So that got copied over as miscellaneous. And then ours is also shown as antenna income. That got copied over as other. So we did account for that. It just got transferred to the county's test sheet on a different row. So,
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, thank you for confirming that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
yes, thank you. As I noted earlier, the rental rate on this property is on average $39.68, and we're using $36 a square feet. On top of that, we're reducing that again by 8%. So it's actually at a $33 per square foot rate that we're using net effective, including if you include our vacancy and our deduction from the actual average of this property. We do retest this property at the same or similar NOI as the original, and we ask the board to confirm this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
yes, thank you. So the reason the rental rate is lower is because the county applied their uniform concessions. We've seen this on the majority of offices this year. In prior years, they would apply 8% concessions. This was well accepted. This is how they did it. Last year, they increased that to 10% as concessions increased in the county. The reason they apply it to the rental rate above the line is to amortize concessions over the life of the lease, so you don't have large fluctuations as concessions are incurred. This has been the county's practice. On the initial assessment, they applied 10% concessions. That's uniform with the rest of their properties. On the test, they changed that to 8% concessions. Now we hear the county again with the 8% vacancy that they gave the property. They say, let's just remember this when we have properties that are not given additional vacancy and are in fact assessed additional income that does not exist. Finally, the cap rate on this one is 55 basis points below one of the best properties in the county that sold with Metro access with long-term credit tenants. There's simply no support for the county's cap rate that's been applied to this property. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's just a money board.
Yeah, I agree with Jordan on his argument about cap rates on the vast majority of office, but not these two. Again, it doesn't get any better than this. And, you have a return on investment of about 8%. And I know the cap rate is supposed to take into account interest rates have gone up. So if you're going to invest in something risky, well, there's no risk here. In fact, there's a tremendous upside. Because these leases go out so long that by the time they're done, you might have a great opportunity to redevelop, or you might get other tenants. We don't know. And so, normally I do agree with the cap rate argument, but I don't with these two buildings.
Mr. Penaranda?
The only issue that I have with this case, actually,
There's a difference, yeah. Why?
I mean, we just made a decision in the previous case that we use the cap rate that is higher. And I think fair treatment for this other building, I think we should use the same cap rate.
8.3 or 8.0?
8.3.
Yeah, that's a good spot, by the way.
So what is that? Cover?
That was a
I could
mistake.
speak, I could speak to the effective age
Sorry.
of the prior
Sorry.
building.
Using the
Sorry, system on the board.
Using the reconstructed numbers, at 8.3 comes to 54,705,100.
What, I'm sorry, say that again.
54,705,100.
So that's the reconstructed.
Column F with the cap rate of 4.
Mr. Metzger.
A few responses, or one response, one comment. I think Mr. Peralta wants to tell us that no, 8.3 is correct for that building and 8.05 for this building. We're not going to hear it. That I support your decision, certainly. But what we think now without that is that the last building was a mistake. I don't see any reason to compound the mistake for equalization purposes. This is what we have. This is correct. This is out of the guidelines. We're doing this case now. Having said that, I think what was also a mistake, again, of fact, not of opinion or judgment, was the deduction for vacancy. He put in 5 for some reason. He admits freely it ought to be 8. So I ran the numbers on column D at 8% vacancy and changed nothing else, because we do that a lot. If column D is lower than the test, even though test is better numbers, we stay with, so we don't, do a loss leader for landlords. And that came out to a figure, and I feel free to check it, 53,044,700.
Using the 8% vacancy?
8% and not 5.
Yeah, I did the same, but I come up with, with a cap of 8.05 to 53,173,814.
173.
I got the same number as well.
Yeah, I'm not real good at punching numbers under the rest. So if it's 2 to 1, I'm happy to be overridden.
Yeah, the only thing, it's kind of the same argument I used earlier. I mean, it opens up everything, as Mr. Peralta did say. That was a mistake to only have 5%. But now we've got the information, we've got better numbers. So I'm not sure why we wouldn't adjust.
Yeah.
That's where I get.
That's the first thing I thought of, because I like the test column better. Generally, because it's based on more realistic numbers.
So that being the case, though.
Yeah.
Your
Your first syllable.
4.5 other than if you want to then take it to the 8.3. I think that's more consistent.
And the income is also less in D than it is in G.
Not sure what I did.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so for column G, the appellant's GPI was higher than column D. So I used the appellant's numbers for that. I applied the 8% vacancy. I did use the county's expenses at $8 a foot. And I used the last cap rate that we used for the last case, and I came up with 52,871,000. We're all really close.
Yeah, we're cool. All right, then I'm going to throw the last one out there. So what I did was,
But again, you're using the last case cap rate, that's all I'm talking about, for this case.
Yeah.
When the guidelines say this case, the cap rate presented is correct. It's a correct cap rate. Forget about the last one, it is or it isn't, we're not sure. We made a mistake or we didn't. But we're on this one, Mary.
okay, well then, I don't have names, because what I did was I took the test and just changed the cap rate to the 8.3. It goes to 54.7, but I agree with your logic that that was a gift on that one, because this one is correct.
Maybe or maybe not. We don't know, don't care, it's gone.
I mean, I changed the cap rate based on pretty much treating both properties the same.
Because they are the same.
And, you know, we set the other cap rate, we set the value based on the other cap rate. I think for this year, we should set the
I
same.
don't know, it could be that this building's a year newer, you know, they built them in phases, there's 3 buildings and a big garage. It could be legit, both cap rates presented by the department.
I think the buildings are almost the same
They're
size.
listed both as 87.
All right, so let's,
Everything's the same too.
we're getting lost in the details here.
Yes.
So we're
We're in this,
these numbers all over the place, but they're.
Yeah.
I would support Ken's number, the 53,173,080.
yeah, and I support Mary saying that's not a good number, we should look at the test. I mean,
Yeah, I originally thought that would be appropriate, but just using the, you know, column F and capping it at 8.3.
Which is very close, it's 53,044.
Yeah.
Yay, nay.
I'll-
Where are you?
If it's 53, I would support it. I think that's kind of in the middle of everything.
yeah, that's pretty close to where the last one should have come. So, but, yeah,
Okay, so you're good. Barnes, you okay?
Mhm.
Okay, so now,
The rationale is using the current assessment at 8% vacancy and
Just cap.
no, the 53,044 is using the test and capping it at 8.3.
the 53,173,814 that you originally came up with, and we corrected the number, is just adjusting the vacancy at 8%, and then using the same cap rate that county use, 8.05.
Right, but we know the income is higher. So I feel like if the counties come back and gotten better information, if we're gonna open it up, you open it up.
so what's your conclusion then, Mary, based on what you just said?
But based on that, if you want to match the 2 cap rates, which is very close to what you're saying, but I just think the logic is cleaner.
That makes sense.
Meaning capping the test at the higher. cap rate.
Yes, it's 53,044
Yeah.
versus 53.
Yeah, I'm not gonna,
Yeah, anything with 53, I think.
That's
Just-
044.
funny.
Unless I did that wrong. Let me check. Yeah, hold on. Hold on. 45, 40. It's 54,705, 196.
good.
And the vacancy of 8% comes from just the rental income, GPL.
Sorry? No, I just took the NOI of the test.
Okay.
Yeah, you no other change. I mean, it's very clean.
4540523 and capped it at 8.3. 54,705,100.
Right.
Yeah, I changed, as I said, I pulled back my 53 million. That was a mistake. That's why we like people checking things. So are you all right with that?
Yeah.
Are you okay with that? Everybody okay?
Aren't you okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to vote against it, but I'm not, just because of the 803, 805, and I'm not going to mess up that result.
We're changing the cap.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead. Somebody.
Greg loves that.
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to 54,705,100 based on increasing the cap rate to 8.3 on the test column.
Excuse me.
Okay, we have a
I'll second that.
Okay, we have Mr. Mendez. All in favor? Aye, opposed. Okay, it's 5-1. If the assessment is reduced to 54,705,100 based on the county's test column, capping it out at 8.3 to mirror the sister building at 2100. Okay, next up is RPC 1404422 at 4075 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. So this is at the intersection of Wilson and Randolph and Ballston. This is the building that has the sweet green on the ground floor, if you're familiar with it. This building has been widely marketed for sale and actually went under contract for sale yesterday. The sale price is less than $30 million or less than $170 per square foot. The owner received more than 15 qualified bids, and none of these bids were at or above $30 million. So it did go under contract for less than 30 million, less than 170 a foot. This, of course, compares to the current assessment of nearly $60 million. Now, looking at our appeal value, we're also above the sale price. We're at $40 million. So one way of looking at this is, how did the sale price get to below $30 million? Was the true value as of January 1, 2024, $60 million, as the county states, and the office market has lost half its value in less than 8 months? This office in particular lost more than half its value in 8 months? Or, as we've proposed, was the true January 1st value closer to $40 million? And the property, as a result of the sale that's in August of 2024, lost about more than a quarter of its value in just over 7 months. It certainly seems difficult to believe the property lost more than 50% of its value in 7 months, as the county proposes. It's much more plausible that the property lost 25% of its value in 7 months. Keep in mind, nothing at the property has changed from the date of value to the sale date. CoStar shows that occupancy actually increased by a couple of percentage points. So if anything, the property improved from the date of value to the sale date. Yet the sale price and all of the bids, more than 15 bids, are for less than half of the current assessment. Again, the property is under contract to the best bid out of more than 15 received. That sale price is less than $30 million, less than $170 per square foot. This is a large reduction of value, but this is where the market is. We knew this last year when we saw the sale of 4601 Fairfax Drive. That property sold at the beginning of August of 2023 for $25 million. Again, 4601 Fairfax sold for $25 million, which is $102 per square foot, and had been assessed in 2023 as $63 million. For 2024, the county guidelines resulted in an assessment for that property that sold for $25 million. The 2024 assessment is $41 million. That August 2023 sale for $25 million was an arm's length transaction. I'm sure we'll hear it at the board later this season. That property, again, is assessed at $41 million versus the sale price of $25. So we know the market has decreased in value by a lot, and we know that the 2024 assessments have not captured that decrease. The sale comp down the road, 4601 Fairfax, was again $102 per square foot. The actual sale price of the subject is less than $170 per square foot versus the current assessment for the subject is $326 per square foot. So we know the market was bad based on 2023 sales. The county has sought to look at 2024 sales to test the 2024 guidelines and assessments. Looking at 2024 sales, we see that every 2024 office sale has come in well below the assessed value. First, we had 1616 Fort Myer sell January 4th for well under the assessment. Then 1201 Wilson sold in February for $34 million less than the assessment. Next, we heard 4350 Fairfax last month. It was under contract or receiving bids for less than $20 million, which compared to the 2024 county value of nearly $50 million. Now we see this property under contract for less than half of the assessed value again. Our claim value in column G2 uses the actual rents in place at the property for leased office and retail. Now, Federated Wireless is known to be vacating at the end of its lease in 2024. This is 11% of NLA that is going dark. Additionally, this tenant was paying above market rents. They're paying over $51 per square foot. The market as of today, or as of the date of value, was closer to $40 per square foot. That's what we've used for vacant office, $40.25 a square foot, which is based on the advertised rate with 1 month free rent. Our proposed value uses the actual pass-through and parking income, as we heard the county previously say they do not contest. We use the county's vacancy rate of 28% per their guidelines. Then we used operating expenses based on 2023 actuals grown for inflation. For the cap rate, our stabilized potential uses a cap rate that is based on the 45 pages of research and analysis we provided in the Wilkes Artist Board Book, which is also supported by the county's own expert report, and we used a standard DFL. Now, our cap rate that we've proposed is actually below what the county's expert report stated it should be. Now, as a final note, this property does lack amenities. When we inspected it last year, there's no fitness center, no conference space, so that we've seen how the county values amenity space very highly. This property does not have amenity space. The county's assessment in their response relies on the pre-pandemic 2019 sale of the property to justify the value. Here again, we see the county claim that because the assessment decreased from last year, it must be fair. We know in reality, the assessment is more than double the actual fair market value of the property. Now, keep in mind this property NOI decreased by 1.25 million in 2023 from 2022. Vacancy increased from the beginning of 23 to the beginning of 24 from under 10% to over 38%, with another 11% known to be vacating, paying above market rents. So that alone supports values below the 2023 assessment. Now, the county test increases the NOI from the initial assessment. We know the initial assessment's NOI is already too high, so it doesn't really make sense that the test increased it further. This property had 38,000 square feet of lease space go vacant in the last quarter of 2023. That means those tenants were paid rent for the majority. Some of them paid rent for all of 2023, will now pay $0 in rent for 2024. These vacating tenants paid about $1.9 million in rent in 2023. Now, if we want to compare NOI to 2023, then we need to look at the NOI less these tenants that vacated. With these 38,000 square feet removed, which they were as of the date of value, we see the 2023 NOI adjusted for better information would be about $3.3 million, compared with the county's test NOI of $4.6 million. This is how the assessment gets to $326 per square foot, which is, again, more than double the contract sale price of less than $170. Knowing this property received 15 bids, it was more than 15 bids. It was widely marketed. It's simply inconceivable that it lost all that value from January 1 to today. It's much more feasible that our value was the true fair market value as of the January 1st, and it lost about 25% of its value to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carlton for the county, please.
Thank you. For this property, Mr. Harmon speaking about this sale that is supposed to occur as if it already occurred and making the comparison with the sales price that hasn't been recorded yet as a determining factor of how you should see this case. What is pertinent in this case is that it did sell in 2019 for 91 million. And since then, the county has dropped this property almost 52.5%, reducing the assessment by 31,389,400. And 24 million of that was in this year alone from 2023 to 2024. And that's about a 29% decrease from last year's assessment. In addition to that, the county is proposing another 2% reduction based on the new information that we received. Now, looking at the overall facts of the property, the per square foot rate that we see for the leases in place are $48.43. The county is using a lower per square foot than that. The appellant is using even lower square foot than that. But yet, when we're looking at the overall NOI of this property, our original projection was, about maybe 800,000 less than what was reported in 2023. And then in the retest, we captured some of that back by looking at more recent information and adjusting the rents higher than what we previously thought was the case in the original assessment. Overall, we did make a change in cap rate. You'll see 6.7 to 7.445 for this property, 2005 property. We did make that change. That was originally an error, 6.7 in the original assessment. So we did make that change. That wasn't pointed out by Mr. Harmon, but I'd like to be fully transparent. And again, we're trailing what the market is doing. So you'll see that, over the course of, pre-pandemic to now, I spoke about those staggering numbers that we reduced this property to. We did see that in previous years it was more stabilized with the recent 2023 INE. We're actually over projecting the vacant square footage in the original assessment as well. So we did make a correction to that to reflect exactly what is current as of 1/1. You'll see that the original assessment had 85,305 square feet vacant. The current reported INE shows 69,264. So we did make that adjustment. Overall, it's still, it did show a lower assessment based on our new information. And we do ask that the board take that in consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, for Jordan, this sale that has been that's, you say it's under contract. Is it beyond feasibility? Is there a significant deposit?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. Is it beyond feasibility?
Is there still a study period? And
There is, yes. The contract was just executed yesterday, so it is in due diligence.
just yesterday, okay.
Yep.
I have a question for, I guess for Rob, on your column F, your GPI is significantly higher than the operating.
Right. What I didn't do, as I've done in previous cases, is that I didn't reconstruct this for whatever reason. I should have. What column E shows is the NOI excluding the vacant square footage.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Retail and office.
I got you. Okay. So then you took it back down below.
Correct.
Okay.
Questions?
Just to be clear, the 4750 and your reconstructed is the rental rate. Is that taking the county concessions? I didn't hear you say that.
So the average rate is 48.43 for the leases in place.
I think it's 4506 based on the 1231 rent roll.
I have 48.43.
Yeah, it's page 2.
It's a big move. That's what.
That excludes industrious is why.
Yeah, Industrious doesn't report any rent, if I'm not
So
mistaken.
the overall office rents are much lower than what the county has done.
Mr. Harmon wants to include Industrious rent of $2.34 as part of the average.
Okay, thank you both. We're
It's
still in question.
leased.
So the-
Mr.
Thank you.
Peralta doesn't.
The question was actually concerning factoring in the concessions, so that's what I was after.
Any other questions?
Answer is yes.
Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. With respect to this case, when you speak about concessions, we do consider the concessions for this case. You'll see that the reported concessions are minimal across the board. And if you were to use that or spread that out over the average term, 10 to 13 years, if you go back to 2020, you'll see that, you know, our $3 or actually our 96 cents compared to what the original rate is, equates about to 2%. And then in addition to our guidelines, another 3%. So 5% on top of that for our concessions. When looking at overall NOI, the column E projection, the NOI is higher without the inclusion of almost $3.3 million of income that's attributable to the vacant space if you use the appellant's pro forma for their vacant square footage. That's again $3.3 million, and we're still under that 5.1 figure
Thank
that
you.
was reported, column E. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peralta. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute, please.
Yes, thank you. You know, again, this is under contract, had more than 15 bids. The best bid is still not even at $30 million. So that's not the value we're arguing for. We're arguing for $40 million. And really the fundamental question is, knowing the answer to the test is less than 30 million as of today, what was the value January 1? Was it 60 million as the county has stated, and it lost more than half its value with no changes at the property between January 1 and today? Or was the true value January 1 closer to 40 million as we've proposed, and it lost over a quarter of its value from January 1 to today? Now we see in the county's response that they've grossed up a leased space that's paying below market rents. They've grossed those up to above market rents. This property's lost 60,000 square feet of NLA that was leased at $50 a square foot. That's going to reset down to $40, which is market. The county's own expert tells us cap rates must be increased when tenants are paying above market rents. Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. Mr. Metzger.
There's a lot going on here, and this industrious space seems odd that they're getting kind of free space. So I just went to a different route entirely and compared columns F and E. And in E, the appellant readily agrees, and this is pretty normal for most property owners, that they don't include in the GPI the value of vacant space. It's not in there. There's not income. That is, of course, in F and in D. And the NOI, given that lack of income reported, is still much higher than the NOI in the revision in column F. So I'm just starting and stopping there.
Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, I'll share my thoughts and see if anyone agrees. First on this sale, You know, I hear what Jordan has argued, and he well may be right about that. But it's not really a done deal till it's a done deal, and you have feasibilities. I don't know, they might find a problem and not go forward. So I think that you know, we have the knowledge or the sense that, yeah, prices have really gone down, but we can't yet quantify it. What I did is I looked at it just from of the magnitude of vacancy, and I upped the cap rate by 0.5. I ended up at 53,946, 200. I'll just see if anyone agrees that that has merit.
In other words, you think this is such a high vacancy?
Yeah,
That it
I do.
it's an exception. It deserves
We've
it.
been around the 40% doing that, and this is what, 39, I think.
I was just looking at that.
Yeah, so I thought it was kind of a big deal that they use an incorrect cap rate. So I started by applying the correct cap rate of 7.445. And the original assessment came out to 53 million. So I wanted to start there. Looking at the revision and the appellant's number, I probably would just apply the correct cap rate. Something different than the original assessment.
To the original.
Yeah.
Of course, we just had this 2 cases ago where that was my suggestion. Johnny, bless his heart, supported, and I ended up supporting the opposite, Mary's suggestion. No, let's go with the test.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Do we have a test?
Well, revisions.
Or revision.
Yeah, it's close enough.
It's not a test.
What's
But it's still better numbers.
Yeah, 53,315,157. Which that's kind of a big deal to apply the wrong cap rate. Makes
Yeah.
you wonder where else they may have done that. But I think that's a good start.
That's a logical thing.
I know originally I argued, and you would argue that generally we take the lower of the revision or test or the original. And that's what you're doing. It's a statements of fact correction, which is exactly what happened 2 cases ago. No, what we did is we took a different cap and we got the evaluation down, but, you know, which I didn't agree with. But, you know, the bottom line was comparable, but for consistency sake, I'm still with you that we got to look at the test or the revision's the same thing. I mean, he just was looking at modern information, basically including the not reported vacant space, retail and office in his revision, and also looking at a higher, more realistic operating expense. I mean, this really is a test, even though, you know, and
Either way, it's a huge drop from last year.
All right, so where is everybody?
so does anybody find a fault with the revision, column G, and any,
I like it.
I'm sorry, not column G, column F.
But it's not as low as what you guys have done.
No, when I first read the case, I was in favor of taking the advice and
Yeah, that's what I did when I reviewed it.
All right, so
And it's not because it's 30% less than last year. I mean, each year is its own year.
excuse me.
And
All right, so I just want to, so are you with the,
I'm okay with the revised number. I mean, I was just checking the John's number, but
okay, revise, where are you, Mark?
I'm good with
What's the revised number?
column F.
F.
F. Look down the bottom of F.
That's not fair to the applicant,
Okay, well,
because usually they do the assessment. And then if the revision comes out higher, they go with the assessment, but the assessment used the wrong cap rate.
no. The original used the wrong cap rate.
That's what he.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
That's
about.
what he meant.
I know that was my original argument. Had they used the correct cap rate originally, it would have been even lower than the revision. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just what, and that's what I brought up. Johnny seems to support that.
Yeah, I think we should go with that, Jake.
But they're just so far apart.
Again, you know,
So,
keeps,
so what do you got for a number?
My number is 53,315,000.
if that's what it would have been had they not made that error.
Yeah.
back.
Maybe we,
315.2?
I keep
Yes.
going back and
maybe
forth.
we wouldn't be sitting here. I mean, we probably would be, but.
Anyway, but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree
So
with
you're
both
doing
of
the
you and your
original
both.
assessment at
For-
7.45.
Yep.
Okay, so you got 3 over there?
I'm good with it. You're good with it. Where are you?
Again, I go to him. You
No,
know,
he's already on the revised. Revised. Correct. Now it's gonna revert back to the original, so we can't.
yeah, we can't, so let's keep cogitating. We got a couple minutes here. Again, let me just think out loud if you don't mind. Originally, again, Johnny's rationale is exactly right. This is what the number would have been had they not made a mistake, which happens. I mean, it's not a big deal. But your contention that none of the column D from 2 cases ago, and probably this case, none of the numbers in column D count. They just don't count because we have much better numbers in column F, revision test. And we ought to go with that because that's what really, what will we go with?
I can go
I am
either.
too.
I'm up on the spikes of a fence here.
That number reflected, if the correct number was on that page, we would be going.
We go with it. Maybe, yeah,
Well, I suspect not just because you've come so far, but,
Yeah,
yeah, we
Your
probably would be, but
okay,
yeah,
can you go? with that?
Yeah, I can do
Let's,
yeah,
I'll do it just.
that's fine.
Okay, I'm gonna move that we reduce the assessment to 53,315,000.
A second.
That's based on using the correct cap rate for the original assessment.
Thank you.
So that is Mr. Logan, second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So it's reduced to 53,315,200 based on the original assessment
Wrong.
using the correct cap rate of 7.45.
445.
445. Okay, next case, RPC 140290014, 4001 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes.
Yes, thank you. So 4001 Fairfax Drive, this is at Fairfax and Quincy, also in Ballston. It was built in 1989, and as of the date of value was over 17% vacant. There's only one issue on the appeal. It's the cap rate. But first, I just want to point out that the county did adopt the 10% concessions on their test column. This is, as we've been stating in all these cases, the uniform county methodology. Now, I want to start by reiterating that the standard of proof in Virginia is the preponderance of the evidence. Now, as that relates to the cap rate, I'm not going to go into as much detail as I have previously. I assume everybody recalls what we've discussed, but I'll start with 4601 Fairfax Drive. This is a property just a couple blocks down the road from the subject, also built in the 1980s. Very comparable property. The county themselves in October of last year vehemently argued that 4601 Fairfax was a good office property. They went so far as to list off leases that run through 2030, 2029, 2028, as well as stating that it is highly likely that that it is speculative that GSA would stay past its lease that was set to expire in a couple of years. So 4601 Fairfax Drive sold August of last year for $102 a foot. The county in October of last year stated that is a good operating office property with GSA as a main tenant and leases that run through 2030. That property again sold for $102 per square foot. We also just heard a case, property went under contract. It received, and even if that contract on the last property falls through, there's 15, 16 other bidders that are waiting in line to pick up the contract as well. But that property went under contract for less than $170 a foot. Of course, that's a little better situated as well. But this all compares to the assessment of the subject property at $321 per square foot. We also heard last month 4350 Fairfax Drive, also just down the street, receiving bids for about $100 a foot, which aligns with the sale of 4601 Fairfax. So we have three sale comps, two built in 1989, just like the subject, that sold or set to sell for right at $100 a foot. And the third sale comp is better located and 20 years newer. It's getting bids at less than $170 a foot. The current assessment on the subject property, again, is $321 a foot, which is, of course, more than triple what the sale comps came in at and double what a better situated, newer property is set to sell for. Also, if we look at 1201 Wilson, this is one of the trophy properties in Arlington down in Roslyn, 98% leased with credit tenants. That property sold, if we apply the county's own guideline cap rate methodology as stated in the 2024 DREA guidelines, we see that property sold for an 8.6% cap rate. The current assessment on this property imputes a 7.745% cap rate. So over 100 basis points lower than what one of the best properties in the county sold for. This is just a large disconnect. It's again, the standard of proof in Virginia is preponderance of the evidence. We've heard the counties rely on the Corpax report, but of course, as we've discussed the Corpax report, it's really just two sales that he relies on for his range. The county relied on the incorrect one when assessing these properties. If we look further at the Corpax report, the other sale that should have been picked up by the county was 1776 Wilson. That property was 85% occupied. This property, of course, 83% occupied, so similar occupancy. 1776 Wilson was a newer building built in 2012 versus the subject built in 1989, both metro accessible. Corpax stated that comp was at a 9.6% cap rate. So a newer building, occupancy roughly the same. That's the more appropriate comp to use, not the comp that the county chose to use, which was the Microsoft building in Roslyn. The rest of the evidence, again, preponderance of the evidence, all of the other outside of that one Microsoft building sale, which again was one person's opinion of that sale. All the rest of the evidence supports higher cap rates. The PwC survey shows a cap rate range once adjusted for this property of 8.2% to 11%. RERC shows a cap rate range of 9 to 0% for tier 1 properties adjusted for tax rates. The Delta Associate Survey of Local DC Investors shows an average cap rate of 9.21. CBRE first half 2023 cap rate survey shows a range of downtown DC office market cap rates from 8.2 to 9%. As I discussed, market sales in the county support higher cap rates. So really all of the available evidence supports higher cap rates than what the county's imputed for this property. Even the expert report that the county stated they relied on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Thank you. As you've seen in other properties, you see the same pattern. The county's assessment is lower than what is reported in the 2023 INE. The reconstructed column imputes the income for the vacant square footage, and then the test takes into account the new information and still supports the original assessment. That's the pattern you've seen in every case that comes before the board. Now, whether you believe the appellant or the county is entirely up to different factors that are associated with the case. The appellant is actually projecting a higher NOI in their pro forma compared to the original assessment versus in addition to the original assessment and the test. So they're at, I'm going to say maybe 60,000 more than the tested column. the county, due to our guidelines and the way we've looked at the information across all office buildings is pretty similar and uniform. So when we looked at this property, we didn't increase the rents, although, you know, after looking at this, the average rents are at 35, 36. You see that concessions for this property shouldn't have been even considered. You have, you know, little 45,000 in 2021, 19,000 in 2022, 31,000 in 2023. Over a course of 10 years, we're talking $10,000 per year over the course of the term of those leases that, you know, if signed during that time period, that's what it would equate to. When looking at the reconstructed I&E in column F, we're projecting a $6 million NOI. We've deducted, I want to say about 700,000 in our test from that reconstructed NOI. And, you know, that's due in part to, you know, just considering all the factors of this case and looking at the vacant square footage we accounted for. That's why Mr. Harmon didn't really speak to any of that. You know, he spoke directly just to cap rate. But the true facts of this case is that the assessment, the original assessment, was low at $31 per square feet. We're testing at 18% vacancy, which is consistent with the retest because the change in square footage vacant is very minimal, so it wouldn't change that range of vacancy. And then we actually applied, I don't know what was happening when I did this valuation, but $11 per square feet for this particular case, which you see in the history of this property has never achieved that. And they're, you know, averaging about $9 a square feet. In the test, I backed away from that, maybe even generously at $10 a square feet. And again, that's more than what the history has shown. And, you know, it resulted in an NOI that is still less than the reconstructed I&E and the original I&E, exclusive of the vacant income of about $1 million if you go with the pro forma that the appellant is saying. So all the facts of the case point to general support for a confirmation of this case. I think that, you know, the original assessment was generous, given that there was, again, $11 in expenses given. And then the rate again was at $31 per square foot, where the average is 35, 36. So I do ask that the board support and confirm this case at $66,037,500. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from board members? Tremendous.
Sure, for the county, in columns F and F1, I know we've touched on this before. I think it's like a software error or something like that, but is there a way to make it so that the cap rate is just uniform going forward? Like, is that like a software issue because it's 7.745 instead of 7?
Yeah, we actually did. Derek can speak to this. That we had our guys fix that, so it's no longer going to be an issue of rounding going forward when we do the 2025 assessments. So you won't see that difference in from what the original assessment was to what it should be in our guidelines at 7.745.
Okay, thank you. Just with all the cap rate talk, I think it's important to be consistent.
No question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Metz.
Yeah, okay. Question for the department. On column F1, retail. Income, 23,000 plus of retail income, forgetting about the dollars per square foot per second. And in G, it's only 10,500 or so. Did you put in vacant? Did you just avoid count row 2A for vacant retail, just put it all in 2, the 23? Is there a D 23,000 plus? Yeah, okay, great. I figured that. So my question then, with that confirmation, is that generally vacant space you have in all cases all the time. I'm sure there's an exception somewhere and maybe this is it. Vacant space you always value at less than actively leased space per square foot. But in this case, you didn't. You just said, yeah, it's all the same, vacant, lease, same. Comment on that?
Well, actually, I'll actually speak to that. The square footage is 100% office. From what I'm looking at here, it's 35,356 square feet vacant in 2A, or in 1A, I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, I'm talking only about retail. And you did that, 1A, vacant space is valued at less per square foot than lease space.
Right.
Pretty consistent. But you didn't do it I mean, having said that, if you lowered it a couple dollars, the bottom line would start probably in F1 still be higher than in column D. But it stuck out at me that you valued them the same. It doesn't matter the bottom line. So question asked and doesn't need to be answered.
Any other questions? Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up then.
Yes, thank you. Again, looking at the facts of the case, the original assessment is at $31 compared to what is the average for the property at $35.36. The vacancy is consistent with the new information received in 2023. The expenses are $2, higher than what the average is for this property. And the original assessment should be supported and confirmed at $66,037,500. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. To start, I just want to point out the assessment in column D does not impute $11 in operating expenses as the county rep has stated. That appears to be a math error. Take that expenses number divided by the NLA. You see that it's only $10 a square foot. Now, this case illustrates the impact of missing the cap rate by as much as the county has. You can impute NOI that is below actual and still arrive at a final value that is higher than fair market value. You'll note we did not contest NOI. The county did not contest cap rate. The standard again is preponderance of the evidence. Here, a conservative adjustment of 145 basis points to the cap rate results in a reduction even if we cap out the actual 2023 NOI. It's still about a $3 million reduction. That's the importance of when you miss the cap rate by as much as the county has, it results in a much higher final value, even if you use a lower NOI. You have to get the cap rate close to market. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board. I mean, the actual dollar amount on that expenses might be incorrect per square footage, but the dollar amount is correct. So
The total amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that Mr. Peralta said in his wrap up. I'm okay with the original assessment.
Could you go back to the dollar amount and operating expense? Say it again,
well,
please.
I mean, it could be, a typo. They're not using the right square footage, but when you look at the dollar amount, I'm fine with the dollar amount, the 2,077,42.
We really should be going with dollar amounts versus percentages per dollars per square.
Right. I mean, I acknowledge that it's an incorrect number outside of the column, but the number in the column is
$11.
generous. Compared to what was reported, it's actually
And that's okay.
yeah, it's actually more than what
It's actually $10
was asking for.
8 cents or something. Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
not
I agree.
a lot of weight on that typo.
Yeah, it could be just.
Yep, Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, I would argue that the assessment itself is generous because they're using a lower GPI than the account arguing in their pro forma. They're using a higher expense rate. The only thing is everything else being changed. So I would support the
Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, the only comment I would make is that nothing's really changed with respect to this building and how it's operated. And we know that the interest rates did go up dramatically. And so I think we should stick with the assessed value as of 2023, because I know it did go up.
That's the only thing that stuck me. There's actually an office building, a reasonably fine, well-located office building that increased in value, but I don't see where the numbers deny that.
It's cap rate.
Well, no, but the cap rate's the same as every other cap rate we use for similar buildings.
That's his argument that the cap rate's wrong.
No, I know, but I'm talking about, I understand this is a cap rate, means how the appellant started out. He's absolutely correct. It's a cap rate issue, but we made our decision on how to treat cap rates all year long. We're in the fourth month here, so there's no surprises to us, I think.
Ken, I took the operating year, column E, and then I applied a cap rate of 8.25, and I'm above the assessment. And so, if you apply the 9.1, then you're going to be below it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I just don't think the office building's gone up. I just don't think it's possible. I may be by myself.
No, again, I agree with you, but that's intuitive, and we've got to
Right,
be a
and
little
that's-
bit more
You're
definitive.
saying that, then that's every,
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
would be in the same place, which I can't go that far.
To last year.
All right, so original assessment, where are you, Mark?
I was over the original assessment, I believe, because that's what we've been doing. But I think they're wrong.
Ken?
No, yeah, what he said.
I'll move to confirm the county at the 66,037,500. Second. Okay, Mr. Mendez, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Okay, the county is confirmed at 160, or I'm sorry, at 66,037,500. And why from Johnny? Maybe one in front of that. Okay, final case, RPC 16037,004 at 1812 North Moore Street. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this.
Yes, thank you. So 1812 North Moore, this is a 561,000 square foot office building in Roslyn. The issues on appeal are the office rental income, the operating expenses, and again, the cap rate. This property had 2 new leases in 2023 that were at a net effective rental rate of just under $51 per square foot. These leases were included with the appeal. The assessment imputes vacant office space at $54.25 per square foot, and the test imputes it at $52 per square foot, still above the most recent leasing activity that was $51 a square foot. Now, looking at the 4-year operating history of this property, we can see exactly why we need to consider concessions on assessments. Not only is it directed by Virginia law and generally accepted appraisal practice, but this property has averaged $3.8 million in concessions each year over the past 4 years. So that's not an insignificant sum. Clearly, we need to consider concessions when we're assessing properties. The assessment, however, fails to consider concessions on the leased office space. Concessions have averaged 16% of rental income over each of the past 4 years, yet the county test only allows for 8% concessions, or about half of what the property has averaged over each of the last 4 years, also below the 10% concessions that the county has applied to other office properties in the county. Next, the initial assessment imputed operating expenses at the 2022 actual level. The county test then changes this to the 2023 level. Of course, we're projecting forward for 2024 expense levels. Looking at the operating history of the property, we see that it was stabilized in 2023 when operating expenses were $11.25 per square foot. The county test imputes operating expenses at this exact same level for 2024, which of course fails to account for anticipated increases that are naturally occurring in the market due to inflation. Finally, the cap rate the assessment assumes is below any data source available. Even the low end of the county's own expert report didn't contemplate rates this low. Now, one method of adjusting this is the county told us they looked at the Corpax expert report. Within the Corpax report, he states, in order for my cap rates to be applicable, you should use an NOI that does not include real estate tax reimbursement income. The county's assessment does include real estate tax reimbursement income. So that's an adjustment we can make to the NOI, to the assessment, that will make the Corpax cap rates more applicable to the subject. Real estate tax reimbursement income for this property in 2023 was $646,000. If we remove this from the assessed income, this would bring the cap rate, the county's cap rate, closer in line with at least the low end of the Corpax cap rate range that was based on a 92% occupied building versus this one that's about 77% occupied. If we make that adjustment as stated by the county's expert report, which is removing real estate tax reimbursement income, the assessment's NOI would decrease to $17,662,000, and the county test NOI would decrease to $17,875,000. Cap those out at the county's cap rates, which would be closer in line with the Corpax report, and you probably get a number that can be supported by that county's expert report. But you do need to make that adjustment for the Corpax report to have any validity with cap rates. Otherwise, there's simply no support available, no data points available to support the county's cap rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county?
Yes, thank you. With respect to concessions for this case and all the cases that are coming before the board, I'd like to point out in this particular instance, in the most recent 2023 INE, the owners report the concessions, $2 million. In the INE statements, we do ask for details on what that $2 million represents. There's no details that are provided in the INE. So when we're looking at all the information that is given to the county, we can't quantify exactly what that $2 million represents. We're not given the information that you see before you today in the board packet, where they're providing the rental information. Here's the rent schedule, here's the abatement, or here's the rent concessions. This is the term. These are the factors that are included with this lease that you guys want, they want us to consider today in the board case. But, given the information that we've asked for, they're not providing it in the timely manner for us to do our due diligence and actually figure out what the concessions are. With that said, we did make a reduction based on what we see in this case. So for the average per square foot rate in this particular case is $65.60. We're at $60 a square feet. And that $5.60 represents about $2,298,400, or about 3% of a reduction beyond what was actually reported in the 2023 INE. You'll see that in addition to that, in comparison, the NOI that's reported, again, we're well below that. This is the same pattern that I mentioned in the previous case. We're well below what they're reporting in 2023 INE in column E. Compared to column D, we're at what, $1.6 million less than was reported there. So 1.6 million plus another 2.3 million in rate reduction from $65 to $60. And then on top of that, we added in the original assessment, we added all the concessions below the line of about $1.7 million in excess vacancy below the line, which this property shouldn't have qualified for. So we gave an additional 5% in vacancy when this property was actually only 22% vacant as of 1/1/2023. I mean 1/1/2024. So so we removed that from our test. We know that that's not the case. based on what was received in the 2023 INE. Our overall vacancy that we originally assessed was 167,234 square feet versus 125,774. So we're above, what is actually vacant as of the first of the year if you compare what they reported in 2023. So again, we're over, in our estimations compared to, what is actually being reported in the INE. We did make a change and this is the one change we made in expenses. We actually upped the expenses $1.28 from the original assessment to kind of reflect what the current expenses are being reported. And that's a huge uptick compared to the previous years that this property has experienced. You'll see that $11.28 is quite high, when looking at all the other properties in the county. And, even with that, we still are testing at higher than what the original assessment was. So we do, in this case, ask that the board confirm this case. That is all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Mattson?
This is for, I'll start with the department, but maybe the appellant can help. I'm not sure. This has to do only with real office lease income. On page 2 of 120 of the packet, down the bottom under DREA, it says office leases average $65.60 square foot, and new leases were $56.84. So my first question is, and before I ask the question, the appellant said no, the new leases were, I forgot, $50 plus or $52. Mr. Harmon, give the number that you gave early on.
Yes, so that 5092
Just
is
the number, thanks.
$50.92 net of concessions. Yeah.
Terrific. Net of concessions. Oh, so it's actually higher than that. I see. Okay, so back to Rob. So in that same line on page 2, the $56.84, that's the actual lease rate, not net of concessions. Is that correct?
That is for the existing leases in place.
No,
I'm
just
sorry.
New leases, yeah.
That's the new leases, yeah.
Yeah, that's because the difference is concessions. Great, perfect. So last question, because it's all in the same sentence. The new lease is this 5684 net or gross or whatever. Is that factored into the 6560 of all? It's part of the quote office leases. It's all.
No, so I treat it separately because in the past there was always just one number being presented to the board, and then this whole argument of all the new leases would show this amount a lower rent. So what I opted to do is separate the leases in place versus the new leases or the vacant square footage that would achieve what the new leases are receiving. And so by doing so, that's where the split happens, where I look at the leases in place, which is at 6560, and then the new leases at 5684.
This is different. I wanted to get that square.
And Mr. Matskin, if I may clarify, so 6560 includes the new leases. We use the new leases to impute rent on vacant office. We're saying this is what happened most recently at the property.
Right.
This is what's most likely going to happen for
Right,
the
which
rest
is
of
what they have in the test. Yeah, good, thanks.
Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, this is for you, Rob. Mr. Harmon keeps making the argument that your own expert says that if you're not going to allow real estate taxes as an appropriate expense, then you got to up the cap rate by 0.5. Why didn't the county do that?
This is we actually talked about this, the director and I, and he had tried to make conversation with other counties. This is how we've always applied, our methodology throughout, looking at all the sales and all the assessments. The real estate taxes below the line as expense were always taken out.
Right.
And we've never made a change based on that.
But your own consultant, your own expert is saying you should have.
Right. And we have reached out, I believe. I don't know if Derek can speak to that.
Yeah,
but
I can help provide some insight on that. Mr. Corpax, he makes that statement in his research because he's after the base rate and he's not going after a loaded tax rate. And conferring with other jurisdictions that use the same report, it's appropriate to leave the expense in as a pass-through if you're going to be then loading the tax rate after the fact. So we have historically left it in as income as reported. And we also leave it in when we're analyzing NOIs for cap rate research as well to determine the cap rates. So that's that's Mr. Corpax's statement in regards to his report. We use his report as a source, but we think that our approach and how we determine our cap rates is appropriate.
And Mr. Lawson, if I may address that, that's incorrect based on the Corpax report, which I can share my screen if the board will allow. So this is the page from the Corpax report. I've highlighted the section. It says with appropriate adjustment for the tax load. So that's saying your base cap. That's saying you need to adjust for the tax load. He goes on to say, it may be applied to the market-derived NOI of typical office properties in each jurisdiction, excluding real estate tax reimbursement revenue and expenses. The county excludes expenses, does not exclude reimbursements. So you need to make both of those adjustments. You need to exclude expenses, revenue, and load the tax rate as well, according to Mr. Corpax.
We're just saying that when we uniformly research our NOIs in comparison to cap rate studies that we do outside of the Corpax report, we look at that uniformly and that we include it there as well. So
there's been no studies provided.
All right,
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah,
Open that can of worms for the 16th
yeah,
time.
they don't have to.
Okay. You're not going to agree on that. Any other final questions? Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, sorry. Again, this property, we've done the retest of the property to account for the new information. We're below $1 million and some change below what the reported income is for the property. We're testing at a higher value than what was shown on the reported income. We have 1.8 million that we deducted from the original assessment that shouldn't have been deducted because the property is only 22% vacant. So the vacancy for the original assessment should be 23%, not 28%, and no deduction below the line for this property. But we do argue that, or we do ask that the board confirm it at 254,968,600. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So the county rep has stated multiple times it's 22% vacant. Look at the rent roll, look at the county's own vacancy. It's 23.4% vacant. That puts it in the 28% vacant tranche of the county's vacancy adjustments. You notice that the county kept the 28% on the test. The county rep did not change it. That's why it is in the 28% tranche. Now, we heard the county state they didn't have the I&E that was submitted in March of this year when they were creating the assessments in October of last year. So they couldn't consider concessions. State law requires you consider all information submitted with the appeal. So this includes information like the I&Es and the appeals and include concessions. Concessions need to be included on both the leased office and the vacant office. The test does not grow OpEx for 2024 from the 2023 levels, and the county does not remove real estate tax reimbursement income as directed by the only source that they could find to support their cap rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board. I mean, I would disagree with one thing the appellant just said, that the county claims they didn't have the information and didn't use it, it's clear there's 28% coming off the original assessment.
In the test column, yeah, they were reducing. it.
I'm even talking about in the original assessment, so I don't know where you're getting that from, but I mean, short of, without having had the 2023 information, short of making the incorrect adjustment below the line, I think the county was pretty darn right on target with the numbers. And I mean, I'm fine with the original assessment.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. It's one of those cases that for today, I didn't think there was anything to do with the adjustment. I agree. I think the below the line deductions are just an extra topping on the cake.
Or an extra.
Topping on the cake.
Yeah, which, you know, we'll go back next year, but
You know, again, there's a reduction from 285 million, 254 million. And yet on the one, it went up.
I didn't
On
hear
the prior, one, yeah,
On the earlier case, it went up by 2
yeah, no, yeah.
million.
I know, it's hard to imagine any building.
I know.
This was down 10%.
Yeah, I
He's making a.
I don't think it went down far enough, but I'll go ahead. It seems the consensus is to go with the original, so I'll stick with that.
Yeah. Well, again, the test did, I think, include concessions, and it still wasn't lower than the original,
Yeah.
which is another way of agreeing
Well,
with
because
you.
the original had the same concessions.
Well, but that was just again, an estimate based on 22 information. Again, it's,
All right, I'm gonna move to confirm the county. And the second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? You're in, Mark? Unanimous, county's confirmed. At 254,968,600. Thank you.
Thank
both.
you all.
Thank you.
Okay, that completes the agenda. Anybody got anything? No? Okay, then we will stand adjourned at 11:17, reconvene next Tuesday virtually for everyone, August 27th at 9 a.m. Thank you.
stop recording.